At 3:14 a.m., a wall of orange chewed the horizon behind my ranch house while sprinklers hissed like snakes in the darkness. My phone flashed with an urgent alert that made my blood run cold. Controlled burn reported at 221 Dry Mill Road. That was my address. I don't do controlled burns at 3 in the morning. I grow corn. $2 million worth of seed to contract sweet corn that was now snapping and blackening like paper in the wind. Through the smoke, I could see a figure on the cul-de-sac. Lynette Broadbent, our HOA president, stood there in her warning tape yellow bathrobe, waving a clipboard at the arriving firefighters and shouting with a triumphant tone, "You're welcome." The flames reflected in her eyes as she watched my livelihood burn. My name is Victor Hale, and I'm known as the Quiet One on Larkspur Row in Harveston Oaks. I prefer spreadsheets, irrigation schedules, and the peaceful silence of early mornings. My life revolves around simple pleasures. Tending rows of corn, roasting coffee beans in my barn, and spending time with my loyal dog, Gus. When the subdivision wrapped itself around my grandfathered parcel 5 years ago, I signed the disclosure twice. Agricultural use continues, it stated clearly. The county made sure everyone understood that my farm predated the neighborhood by 3 generations. Lynette, meanwhile, runs the HOA with the zeal of a medieval tax collector crossed with a reality show producer. She once measured a neighbor's grass with actual calipers because it was a 1/4 inch over regulation height. To her, my corn isn't a legitimate crop providing food for thousands. It's a scandal that makes the block photos for the HOA newsletter look, as she puts it, less coastal modern and more Nebraska nightmare. The harassment started with warnings printed on pastel cardstock that she personally delivered to my door. The first one cited vegetative monotony as if growing the same crop was somehow a violation. The second declared my fields a non-compliant vista that disrupted the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. She actually classified my 100-year-old scarecrow as anthropomorphic signage and demanded its immediate removal. Then came the fine for dawn tractor noise, which was particularly ridiculous since I don't even own a tractor. It was a rooster from 2 houses over, but Lynette refused to acknowledge her mistake. She slid me a cease and desist order for agricultural odors during harvest season, as if she could legislate the smell of fresh earth and growing things. One morning I found her actually climbing my fence, her perfectly manicured nails gripping the chain link as she zip-tied a bright orange NO farming placard to my irrigation timer. When I asked her to leave my property, she huffed that the HOA has jurisdiction over all visible elements that impact property values. The surveillance escalated quickly after that. Lynette acquired a golf cart with an amber beacon that she claimed was for official HOA business. Every night, she'd make reconnaissance passes along my fence line, that amber light blinking like a tiny lighthouse of pettiness. She'd stop every 50 feet, take photos, and make notes on her tablet with the intensity of a detective at a crime scene. Then a drone appeared, buzzing low over the corn tassels like an angry mechanical wasp. The footage hit our neighborhood next-door app within hours, complete with inflammatory captions. "Is this a cartel field in our backyard?" one post asked. "Suspicious agricultural activity threatens our children," read another. She organized what she called a town hall on corn, scheduling it deliberately for August during my peak harvest season. Standing at a makeshift podium in the community center, she clicked through a PowerPoint presentation that would have been hilarious if it wasn't so vindictive. She had graphs showing property value correlations with agricultural proximity, all fabricated of course. She presented testimony from experts who turned out to be her cousin with a real estate license and a blogger who wrote about lawn care. The final slide, labeled Community Vision in bold letters, was just an architectural rendering of my entire acreage paved over and converted into a massive pickleball complex with a meditation garden where my barn stood. Everything changed when the county zoning officer sent her an email with the right to farm statute attached, a very real law that protects agricultural operations from nuisance complaints. The HOA attorney, clearly tired of her crusade, reminded her in writing that the covenants and restrictions stopped at my deed line and that the board had zero authority over my grandfathered property. That's when Lynette went completely off script. At 2:47 a.m., she called 911 to report a dangerous methane plume emanating from my property. She called back minutes later claiming she could see a suspected illegal burn pile that was threatening nearby homes. 10 minutes after that, neighbors heard sharp popping sounds. It wasn't gunfire as some initially feared. It was my irrigation PVC pipes exploding from the intense heat. Someone had jumped my fence under cover of darkness, sloshed accelerant across the outer rows of corn, and sparked a line like a fuse running straight toward the heart of my fields. The fire captain later found a silver lighter in the grass near the fence, along with distinctive shoe prints that matched the tread pattern on Lynette's HOA-issued Skechers, the one she wore for her nightly patrols. To compound her lies and make everything worse, Lynette called the fire dispatcher back twice more, this time claiming with a panicked voice that the farmer is hostile and heavily armed and that she feared for the safety of the first responders. The initial crew actually backed off and requested tactical support based on her false reports, which meant my contract crop continued burning while they waited for backup. By the time they realized there was no threat and moved in, my field had become $2 million worth of charcoal question marks standing in neat rows. By sunrise, my property looked like a crime scene, which is exactly what it was. The fire marshal arrived first, followed by the agriculture commissioner, and then a full sheriff's arson investigation unit. They combed through the devastation with methodical precision. I produced everything they needed. My contracts with 3 major food distributors, my crop insurance policies, the original grandfathered plat from 1952, and most damning of all, an inbox full of Lynette's increasingly unhinged emails with subject lines like urgent remove corn immediately and final warning before HOA action. The dispatcher had managed to triangulate those hostile farmer emergency calls. While the number had been spoofed to hide the caller's identity, the calls originated from an IP address that traced directly back to Lynette's home Wi-Fi network. The fire captain held up a laminated document they'd found near the burn origin point. It was titled Emergency Burn Plan with the HOA logo printed at the top. At the bottom, in Lynette's own distinctive handwriting, were the words approved by me followed by her looping signature. The county council arrived with a folder that might as well have been Lynette's death warrant. Page 1 contained the full right to farm statute with relevant sections highlighted in yellow. Page 2 showed the HOA bylaws, specifically the section stating the board has no authority over non-encumbered parcels that predate the subdivision. Page 3 was my signed and notarized trespass affidavit listing every instance of Lynette entering my property without permission. The HOA vice president, a normally composed woman named Janet, went pale as fresh milk and whispered to the investigator, "We told her to drop this months ago." The entire board warned her she was going too far. The fire marshal looked around at the gathered crowd of neighbors and officials, then asked in an even tone that carried perfectly in the morning air, "Where's Ms. Broadbent now?" At 4 p.m. sharp, Harveston Oaks learned what a SWAT response looks like when you manufacture false emergencies about armed farmers. The armored vehicles rolled down our pristine suburban street, their heavy tires humming against the decorative pavement Lynette had fought so hard to install. Officers in tactical gear fanned out in a practiced half-moon formation around Lynette's Tuscan beige doorway with its perfectly symmetrical topiary. She was actually filming herself on Facebook Live when they arrived, her phone held high as she narrated to her followers. The caption read "Saving our neighborhood from big corn," and she was mid-sentence about property values when the negotiator's voice boomed through the megaphone. "Ms. Broadbent, this is the sheriff's department. We need you to exit your residence immediately with your hands visible." She tried her classic HOA stalling tactic, shouting back through her Ring doorbell speaker with an indignant tone, "I need any demand served to me in triplicate as per HOA Regulation 7.3. The detective at the door simply held up the warrant where she could see it through her security camera. Arrest warrant for first-degree arson, filing a false 911 report, tampering with agricultural equipment, and felony-level harassment. When they finally cuffed her after a 15-minute standoff, a gust of wind sent ash from my burned fields skittering across the sidewalk like gray snow, dusting her house slippers with the remains of my destroyed crop. The same neighbors who had applauded her pickleball complex presentation just weeks earlier now closed their blinds and retreated into their homes. Her drone, still sitting unattended on her porch swing, blinked its low battery warning like a mechanical confession. As they led her to the patrol car, she kept repeating with a bewildered tone, "But I'm the HOA president. I was protecting property values. This is what the community wanted." The courtroom was standing room only when the judge read out the restitution order. Lynette's insurance company had immediately denied her claim, citing the intentional acts exclusion in her policy. The judge ordered complete wage garnishment from both her HOA president's stipend and her day job as a medical billing supervisor until my $2 million loss plus $60,000 in legal fees were fully repaid. At her current salary, the court calculated it would take 37 years. She was permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the state, enrolled in a mandatory arson offender rehabilitation program that would last 18 months, and assigned 400 hours of community service with the County Agricultural Extension Office. Her specific duty, the judge noted with what seemed like intentional irony, would be replanting windbreaks and restoration work around local farms, particularly those she had previously complained about. The criminal charges carried a potential 5-year prison sentence, but the judge suspended it to 3 years probation with the condition that she maintain a 500-foot distance from my property and cease all contact regarding my agricultural operations. Her face went through a series of expressions as each consequence was read. First disbelief, then anger, then a slow crumbling realization that her 23-year reign as HOA president was over. When the judge mentioned the 37 years of wage garnishment, she actually swayed on her feet and had to grip the defendant's table for support. "But I'm protecting the neighborhood," she said in a small, broken voice that echoed in the silent courtroom. The judge's response was swift and cutting. "You committed felony arson, Ms. Broadbent. You destroyed $2 million of agricultural products that feed families. You're going to pay every cent back." Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she just stood there, staring at the calculation showing 372 monthly payments of $5,487.16.